at first you don't succeed, try again. Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, and today we're... Let me redo that. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, inviting you to celebrate a genre of game that's really been monopolizing my time lately, the roguelike. Inspired by old dungeon crawlers like Rogue in 1980, the roguelike is an impromptu category of game categorized by two main qualities, procedural generation and permadeath. Usually the game's pretty short, theoretically, but the randomized level design and the item spawns mean that you never know exactly what to expect, and if you mess up too much, you're gonna start over from the start. Start beginning. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, and there are lots of ways to make a good roguelike. Any genre and any theme can be turned into that just one more run kind of experience, so I couldn't possibly narrow it down to just 10 entries. We're looking for games that are addictive, inventive, long-lasting, and hair-graying. Something that you could spend years mastering. Obviously, my choices are going to be pretty subjective here, but let's define the scope a bit. First of all, many gamers will make the distinction between roguelike and roguelite, the former being games that truly make you start over, while the latter incorporates some form of progress in between runs, such as permanent stat buffs. That is an important difference, but for the sake of this list, I'll be referring to both as roguelike. I will not, however, include any titles where the repeatable runs aren't the main focus. Commerce-based games like Moonlighter, Dave the Diver, and even the mines in Stardew Valley feature roguelike elements, but not enough for me to truly see them as roguelikes. As for the randomized levels in Persona 3, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, and so forth, I'd say that those aren't roguelikes, they just share a common ancestor in old dungeon crawlers. And lastly, and this is gonna blow your mind, I haven't actually played every video game in existence, so chances are some people's favorites aren't gonna make it today. Have some mercy on me, I'm not perfect. I just like games that demand perfection. So, let's get ready to get good. I am the Green Scorpion, and these are my top 10 roguelike video games. 15. Damn it! Oh. Okay. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, and today we're going to be talking about my top 15 roguelike video games, a genre that has been gaining serious mainstream popularity in the current zeitgeist. So many developers seem to have garnered it. Let's start off with some heresy. The Binding of Isaac. Not only is this game sort of about heresy, I'm sure that to many, I'm a heretic for ranking it so low. I have my reasons, but first attention must be paid. This game is almost solely responsible for the modern interest in the roguelike genre. Fresh off his success with Super Meat Boy, Edmund Macmillan decided to create a game about a sad boy. Vaguely inspired by his own upbringing with his religiously extreme mother, and now I can see why all of his games are about the player torturing themselves.
Dark.
That said, it's an unforgiving but very fun dungeon crawler, taking on a top-down perspective that evokes the original Legend of Zelda. And from its original Flash version in 2011 to its most recent remake, this game has only continued to grow, featuring more playable characters, items, routes, and bosses than any other roguelike, I think. Even now, 13 years later, this game is still supported by the developer, each update housing plenty of loving secrets and Easter eggs that pay homage to the roguelike genre as it's evolved since the game's inception, and gaming as a whole if I'm being honest. This devotion is only matched by the community that's formed around it, which I think is absolutely vital to the experience. Like, the original game was certainly cryptic, none of the items having any text to explain what they do, but that only spurred a ravenous community to help newbies learn the ropes. Or in this case, learn the entrails. And this leads into the reason why I don't think this game quite clicks with everyone. It's freaking gross. The characters are crude and cartoony, everything's blood and guts and feces, not enough to make me feel sick, but enough to seriously wig me out. Which, to be fair, is probably how Macmillan wants me to feel. There's artistry in this unpleasantness, but to me, it also makes a lot of the enemies blend together since I don't want to examine them any closer. And the game's engine has withstood the test of time, but only barely. Its mechanics and controls are a bit bland by today's standards, which will be ably met by the next 14 entries. Still, The Binding of Isaac is an amazing case study of a game, and I can see why many players rack up thousands of hours crying bullets at these angry tumors. It inspired a ton of future developers, even catching the interest of companies like Hoyoverse with the Bizarre Brigade minigame in Zenless. So, hats off and a huge thank you to one of the earliest indie roguelikes, along with Spelunky, who's my honorary number 16. What? I got a lot of games to cover. Quit looking at me with them big old eyes. Now that we've paid tribute to the old guard, let's greet the youngest game on this list, Balatro. Cards are an extremely common motif for roguelikes. In most of them, you're amassing different weapons or relics or abilities, so contextualizing these as cards and making a deck builder just makes sense. But usually the deck building is abstract, representing you fighting monsters or something else exciting. In Balatro, you're actually playing cards. Crazy, kooky, cheating cards. Based around poker, a run of Balatro sees you drawing from your deck and trying to present the best hand you can, be that a flush, a straight, two of a kind, or what have you. After a few hands, you take your winnings to the shop where you can buy more cards for your deck to improve your odds in the next round. These include jokers that act as passive buffs and increase your point gain in certain hands, or even tarot cards that turn everything on their head. Based on what cards show up for you to buy, you'll find yourself adjusting your strategy, maybe to get more 3-card hands, maybe to prioritize pairs, anything to make those numbers go up. Now, cards on the table for a moment. I'm a guy who really likes poker. I play plenty of hands with the mates at the inventory, and as a poker appreciator, I like how this game can take the well-known mechanics of that game and then deconstruct and remix it into something more bombastic. It's kinda like going from Pac-Man to Pac-Man Championship Edition, where you're now racking up crazy scores with ridiculous combos in what is ostensibly the same game. Although, that new Shadow Labyrinth game might have something to say about that. Interestingly though, Balatro doesn't preview your score until you finalize your move, which has prompted modders in the community to create point calculators in the game that might help you maximize your play. And I think that's a fine tool if you want to use it, but I also think that the joy of this game is the moment you grit your teeth and watch the game's UI count up your points, making this quiet tabletop game feel like winning big on the slots. This is the only game on this list without traditional bosses. Instead, you have blinds with minimum point thresholds across and temporary modifiers to the rules, but it's casino levels of addicting without fear of actual bankruptcy. Which, fittingly, also comes with a lack of control that's familiar to anyone who's been to a casino. After a while, it comes to a point where you need to roll for specific seeds in order to win games. And the real draw of this game for many people is after you beat the roguelike and unlock the endless score attack mode, perfect for anyone aiming to test the limits of their skill. It's part solitaire, part Texas Hold'em, part Dominion. And for a weird combination like that, I'm all in. Just to give you an idea of how close this list got for me, at number 13, we have a game that I've often seen as other people's number 1. Enter the Gungeon. And honestly, for good reason. Enter the Gungeon applies the roguelike formula to a top-down twin-stick shooter, which is now a popular combination for games like Nuclear Throne or Axolotl. But you could argue that Gungeon is the best at mixing this particular cocktail. Granted, the early stages can be pretty rough when you're first getting a knack for it. You start with your choice of 4 Gungeoneers, but every advantage you acquire comes with a drawback. The Convict has a nice rage mechanic, but you're losing out on that much needed armor that the Marine has. But the Marine also only starts with 1 gun. The Hunter starts with 2 and has a dog that can randomly find items, but it feels like that never actually happens. There's never enough keys for chests, so the pilot can pick locks, but that has a low chance to succeed and leaves the chest perma-locked upon failure, so is it even worth doing? Every choice I made felt wrong at first, but the hard truth is, the best choice is to get good. You have a really versatile dodge roll and consumable blanks that let you clear the screen of bullets, but the trick to improvement is learning when to get away with not using these. Only then can you internalize enemy patterns, and these enemies are very memorable, partially for the shameless puns. The Gorgon, the Ammoconda, the Beholster. God, how do I exit this pungent? But the real stars of the show are the guns. They're like characters in their own right, with equally punny names and featuring unexpected synergies with other guns and items to make some truly ridiculous projectiles. This is also the game's main source of meta progression. While other games earn the title of roguelite by offering ways to permanently upgrade your character between runs, Gungeon's approach is instead a series of stores that you can unlock in the main hub, allowing you to purchase new guns and items. Rather than giving you this purchase gear directly, however, these weapons are instead added to the rotation of random drops and loot that you can find in the Gungeon. So while you're not gaining stats or power, you're slowly increasing the likelihood that you'll find some overpowered combination on your next run. Which, to be fair, isn't all that overpowered once you see what some of these bosses can do. You're at the whims of RNG, but it's balanced in such a way that you're always rewarded for fighting back as hard as you can. And while doing research for this entry, I was astounded by just how deep this game gets with its secrets and side quests. There's unlockable characters, hidden optional floors, a boss fight with a rat that turns into Punch-Out at the end. Truly ludicrous stuff that you'd probably only find out with the help of this game's passionate community. Heck, have you heard of the Gunslinger character? Unlocking him basically requires you to beat 2 runs in a row without dying, both ending in a battle with the ultimate super boss. This isn't even about getting good anymore, you need to get great! Well, as a famous philosopher once said, if you're in danger, use a gun. And if that don't work, use more gun. I often think of Crypt of the NecroDancer as a sister game of sorts to Enter the Gungeon. Both are top-down procedural dungeon crawlers, but side by side, they show just how creative you can be with this concept. One's ammunition-based with full circular aiming, the other uses more traditional fantasy weaponry, locks everything into a grid, and did I mention it's also a rhythm game? Yeah, everything in NecroDancer is set to the beat of this game's amazing soundtrack. Enemies, traps, even your own character. This does make the game more about strategy and situational awareness than the song itself, but it's definitely a major factor in how you approach the game, forcing you to count squares to your target. There's even a little leeway in movement. You won't be directly penalized for missing a beat by standing still, but keeping a combo going increases a multiplier for drop gold that you'll need to buy equipment, which is incentive enough to strive for perfection. To compensate for that extra bit of work that your brain is doing, combat and interaction with the Crypt is simplified to use the same buttons as movement. And besides simplifying your choices, the grid gives the game an old school D&D vibe, along with the equipment slots for weapons, armor, headgear, boots, and rings. On top of that is an entire category of torches to determine how far ahead you can see, limited use magic scrolls and bombs, and shovels that let you dig through certain walls and reshape the playing field on the fly. It's a lot of very simple systems layered on top of each other, with each new piece of equipment changing the rules of that mechanic. Maybe you'll get a sword that lets you move forward and stab at the same time, or a shovel that automatically clears the dirt on adjacent squares as you go, or a light source that illuminates more if you maintain your combo. And similar to Enter the Gungeon, Crypt of the NecroDancer adds new items over time with its meta progression, letting you spend diamonds to add better gear to the rotation. Taking it a step beyond, you can also pay to have gear that you don't like removed from the rotation, so you can get more of the loot that you actually want. There's even a shop that lets you spend diamonds to start with certain items on your next run, which is great for a head start. And diamonds disappear after you leave the hub anyway, so you're incentivized to spend them somehow, and since they only apply to the next run, they're never too cheap. Alternatively, you can spend your diamonds on the bestiary room to let you practice on the bosses that you'll face. And yes, this game is just as punny as Gungeon. Deadringer, Coral Rift, Fortissimo. And I want to point out King Konga in particular for this little trick, where the hey in the song doesn't actually have a beat. You ever join in on a line dance at a wedding, but then you do the wrong move and you feel like an idiot? Well, now imagine if that caused you to be swarmed by zombies. Crypt of the NecroDancer is that song that gets stuck in your head in video game form. You'll be tapping your fingers and visualizing the patterns all day until you get back in there and smash that evil loot. Just missing the top 10, we have yet another drastic tone shift into the dour world of Don't Starve. From the same studio that introduces to the top ninja in gaming, Don't Starve puts a modern spin on the roguelike by comparing it to the survival genre. Runs in most roguelikes comfortably fit within a half an hour, but permadeath is even scarier when it threatens to end the campaign that you've been playing for days. As the name suggests, Don't Starve presents more long-term problems to your survival, dropping you in the middle of the wilderness with a health, sanity, and hunger meter to maintain. Players will need to hunt and gather their food, craft sources of light to drive off, and even maintain their core temperature in the hotter and colder months. Not that there's any lack of hostile creatures waiting just outside of your view. Monsters like roaming spiders and hounds will even invade your camp from time to time. And while this may sound like a more defensive experience, one of the worst things you can do is turtle up when there's work to be done. You'll burn through local resources quickly, and if you're not proactive in gathering beefalo hair for coats and inventing new machines for your camp, you'll find it nearly impossible to survive once winter rolls around. This game is an arms race between you and nature, and I'm not gonna lie, it gives me some serious anxiety. Without experience in the game, you won't know what resources to prioritize in order to craft the recipes that you want, or how to respond to some of the stranger occurrences like raining frogs or summer wildfires. I wouldn't blame anyone who just couldn't invest the time, and if you do put in the work to figure it out, you still have the procedural generation to deal with, which randomly decides where all of the biomes and resources are at the beginning of each run. But past the callous learning curve is a sense of satisfaction knowing that you had to scrape and claw for every bit of progress through this unforgiving world. There are a lot of tricks to the trade that seem to blow the game wide open when I first learned about them. For instance, you can befriend certain creatures with the right gifts, such as feeding these pigmen and then using them to do your dirty work. You can even craft and set spawn points for many of these creatures, letting you pit different mobs against each other while you scamper around and steal the item drops like the little opportunist you are. You can even discover special shrines and build effigies that work as extra lives, providing a little bit of insurance. And thanks to Don't Starve Together, you can now play this game with up to 5 friends, making it easier to keep up with tasks. Just remember that this also means 5 more mouths to feed and 5 more psyches to keep calm. Over the years, they've added a dozen characters that can change up your run, and like with Gungeon, they all have useful strengths balanced by dramatic downsides. Wolfgang, for instance, gets obscenely strong when his belly is full, but gains more stress from his fear of the dark. And then there's Woody, a lumberjack with an unbreakable axe, but the forest itself sees him as an enemy and spawns murderous ents to oppose him. And then there's Wes, who... well, Wes kinda sucks. He's kinda the hard mode of this game. I haven't played this game with friends too much, but I always thought it would be fun to grab a squad that all knows what they're doing. There is a way to beat adventure mode and win the run, but this is a game where the fun is in seeing how long you can go without utter catastrophe. One of the stranger conundrums when deciding what to include on this list was the foggy gray area between roguelikes and visual novels of all things. Yeah, truly. With many dating sims offering up multiple routes to get your favorite waifu, husbando, or non-binary spouse, there is that sense of starting over from nothing. Some even include RNG like Monster Prom, which turns dating into a competitive stat-based board game. But there is one example that I've played that embraces the whims of chance while being unmistakably a visual novel. Let's delve into the world of horror. Why yes, you do recognize this from my top 15 horror games collab with Sheikah. Good times. World of Horror is a Polish-developed game that emulates the UI of a derelict Apple II, inspired by the art of the legendary mangaka Junji Ito, who, if you didn't know, is basically Japanese H.P. Lovecraft. In fact, in his youth, Ito was reading the works of Lovecraft before they gained mainstream popularity in the US. In World of Horror, you live in a picturesque seaside town that's fallen under the influence of an elder god. Now it's up to you to investigate a series of disturbances and get to the bottom of things. This comes in the form of mysteries. Each run will randomly select 5 of these scenarios from a pool of 21, all of which have humorous alliterative names, like The Perilous Parable of the Peculiar Painting, or The Rotten Report of the Rancid Ramen. Seriously, sounds like something you'd read out of Goosebumps. You guys remember those? Truly a game after my own heart, and fitting for the source material too. A big part of Ito's horror comes from the fact that it's kinda goofy. A whole town obsessed with spiral patterns. It's a silly concept juxtaposed by uncanny nightmare visuals. And by God, World of Horror has plenty of that. But that's enough about how effective it is as a horror game. How is it as a roguelike? Well, anxiety is the first word that comes to mind, and in the best way possible. Sure, you'll get used to certain tracks once you've seen all the mysteries, that's true of any roguelike, but there's still plenty of random encounters and unexpected setbacks to keep you on your toes the whole time. And every decision comes with a cost, forcing you to balance your character's health and sanity with the doom meter of the entire town. Sometimes you'll have to risk your own stamina to stay ahead of the god's machinations. Sometimes you'll luck out and get a partner to assist you without spending too much time on it. And while some of these RP moments feel like they have clear right choices, World of Horror kinda makes it fun to make the wrong ones. Sometimes doing something crazy can pay off in a big way. I appreciate the fact that minor injuries and scars on your character's face will stay there for the rest of the run. And the mod support for this game is unreal. If you're worried only 21 mysteries is too repetitive, the community's got you covered with new mysteries, monsters, items, locales, and even different elder gods. The devs encourage this, letting you mix and match and randomize everything to be as chaotic as you want. True, you might get some unwinnable scenarios here and there, but hey, we don't play horror to win. You might not know this about me, but when I'm not playing or talking about video games, I enjoy playing and talking about trading card games. Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh!, maybe a little Pokemon if I'm feeling nostalgic. There's something I love about collecting cards and working them into a battle-ready deck. Plenty of games seek to emulate that experience, and no, I'm not talking about Balatro. That is a card game, but not a trading card game. I'm talking about Slay the Spire, developed by American indie studio Crypt. There's something great about turning TCGs into a roguelike. As much as I love that Rafik of the Many Commander deck that I've labored at for years, starting each run of Slay the Spire with a small collection that grows with each victory takes me back to a simpler time when I saved up money to slowly improve my disparate pile of unrelated cards. And I don't have to spend real money on booster packs, so that's a plus. Seriously, Stoneforge Mystic ain't cheap. Ranking in the middle of the list, Slay the Spire is a wonderful example of many great design philosophies for the genre. For example, cards are a lot simpler in this game than, say, the wall of text on some Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters. I'm looking at you, Super Doom King Purple Armageddon! This is what the Magic the Gathering devs call lenticular design, making easy to understand game mechanics that create depth from how the player combines them, rather than how the designer writes the cards. Cards use energy to play, you only get so much energy each turn, and your average attacks are in the single digits of damage, making it all the more exciting when you hit on the strategy and can achieve 20 damage or higher. And then there are the synergies, which is when two weapons, items, or cards work so well together and inform your choices in a given run. In Pepperhead's video, What Makes a Good Roguelike, which I suggest you watch, Pepperhead categorizes synergies into 3 types. You have minor synergies, where all the cards or relics are just good and work with everything, just maybe with some things better than others. Like, it's never bad to draw 2 cards, that's why Pot of Greed is banned. Then there are major synergies where certain keywords or strategies start to emerge, like say a field spell that buffs all water monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Or a stadium card that boosts all your fighting types in Pokemon. And finally, there are scripted synergies, cards that gain utility from specific other cards, like Wing Karibo and Transcendent Wings, or Brock's Training boosting certain rock Pokemon. Scripted synergies can be fun, Enter the Gungeon makes them particularly exciting, and we all love a good boss monster like Withengar Unbound, but this can be the bane of a lot of card games. Nothing's worse than opening a booster pack and seeing Ojama Yellow, Elemental Hero Bubble Man, Jax Knight, Different Dimension, Xyz. Damn it, I don't run any of these decks! But Slay the Spire hits a sweet spot with major and minor synergies, so every card is good, maybe with some drawbacks, and the right combinations are great and plentiful. I once ran a game with... She's got these Shiv cards that cost 0 to play, but do 1 damage. That's great poke, but they also have exhaust, meaning that they don't get reshuffled back into the deck. But then I got this passive relic that increases the damage of low-level cards, and this other that lets me draw a new card whenever I exhaust one. Now we're talking. Then I beat a boss and got rewarded with Storm of Steel, which can replace every card in my hand with Shivs, so now I'm flinging free-to-play knives like they're going out of style. And I don't feel like I was locked into this type of deck by RNG. It's something that I came up with myself through intuition and a little bit of luck. And finally, Slay the Spire is a great example of risk versus reward gameplay. Plenty of strategies in roguelikes involve delayed gratification, but in Slay the Spire, gambling with your life comes in many different scopes. Maybe you'll play a card that increases your energy so that you can hit harder next turn. Maybe your poison deck takes a few turns to set up so you can kill enemies faster in the long run. And maybe you'll save up your gold early in the run, take on those elite monsters for higher rewards, all in the hopes of buying a boss-busting card on the last leg of your journey. All of the trials and riddles of a fantasy adventure boil down to the movements of little rectangles. I admittedly haven't played every rogue card-like out there, but Slay the Spire definitely sets the standard for how to do it.
We are the flame, burning brightly for all the world to see.
Oh, we are so back! I've made it pretty clear by now that I really like Darkest Dungeon, the grimdark dungeon crawler where everything goes wrong all at once. What's less clear though is the genre I'd fit this into. Missions take the form of smaller procedurally generated excursions, and permadeath is a central mechanic that drives attention. The term roguelite crossed my mind more than once while playing it, but were I to include it, this would be by far the lightest rogue here. The emphasis on the hamlet and the meta progression has me conflicted, but fortunately, Red Hook Studios came back with a sequel that left early access over a year ago, and it's more true to the roguelike experience. Darkest Dungeon 2 has many of the qualities I loved about the first game. The art is grotesquely gorgeous, with smooth 3D models filtered with the now iconic thick outlines. The monsters strike fear into the imagination, and the battles remain one of my favorite examples of modern turn-based combat. That wonderfully horrible stress meter is back, with characters acting erratically when they become too stressed out, and, occasionally, surprise you with a valorous second wind. Positioning remains a major factor, as well as Death's Door, where characters don't die outright at 0 health, but instead start making fatality rolls while you scramble to heal them. The class-based character system also returns. We have some newcomers like the Runaway, a frontline fighter who can set enemy spaces on fire for damage over time, and a duelist who switches between 2 different battle stances, sort of a streamlined version of the Abomination. And speaking of, they recently brought my boy back as well, so I have even more incentive to get back into this game. Most of the other old classes have returned as well, and all of them have been balanced and given new abilities. Even the Leper, my least favorite class from the first game, became extremely fun to use. However, rather than having the heroes of all these classes show up randomly at your doorstep each week, they were treated as unlockable characters that you can buy between runs, with new skills also tied to meta progression. So instead of upgrading individual jesters and highwaymen and hoping that they don't die and waste your investment, you're permanently buffing each class in their entirety. Now, this may sound more meta-progressive than the original, until you see the actual runs, which are now a straight shot to the mountain, classic roguelike. I suppose in the original, you do burn a lot of time grinding safe missions to rebuild your army. Darkest Dungeon 2 wastes your time less, but also doesn't hold back with its encounters. These monsters are bastards, and that's just the way I like them. It's everything I loved about the first game, refined and refocused into a single mission structure that you can fail and fail and fail at again and again. Now, truth be told, I still like the original better, in part because it had more time to be updated. I'm missing certain features from the sequel still, but there's plenty of time for Red Hook to spoil us with new horror. And for a list about roguelikes, Darkest Dungeon 2 does that part of its game better. Video game masochists rejoice because the indie god of agony has returned.
There remains a foothold out of this mire. Now climb.
I've mentioned before how roguelike elements can be laid over just about any genre. For example, Into the Breach is a roguelike tactics game, and Peglin is a roguelike pachinko game. The possibilities are endless. So why do the previous 3 entries essentially boil down to turn-based combat? Screw that! Get me a roguelike first-person shooter! Oh yeah, now this is a real man's game, full of guns and cute cartoon animals. I love it. So, essentially enter the Gungeon for furries. Gunfire Reborn is a Hong Kong-developed shooter inspired by Borderlands and Gungeon with semi-random level design. I say semi-random because procedural generation is a lot tougher in 3D. No matter how much Bethesda and Hello Games says otherwise. Gunfire Reborn has a sense to make sure that the maps are actually fun to play in no matter how the dice roll. There's plenty of cover and vantage points for all styles of play, whether you're a sniper or a mid-range spray and prayer. Even before getting into this game's colorful characters, of which there are many, Gunfire does a really good job of giving a sense of personality to these ranged weapons that could have easily just been generic SMGs and shotguns. Right off the bat, there's a revolver with 9 chambers in it instead of 6. Not sure why, but that really stuck out to me. As you progress, guns have secondary modes of fire that can make them more complex, and come in 3 distinct damage types that correspond to different colors of enemy health bars. Fire-type bullets are best for finishing off standard health bars, but some enemies have shields, of which are best handled with shock-type weapons. And if they have armor, a corrosive gun will take care of that right quick. This can be a little tough to contend with since the game follows Halo rules of only letting you carry 2 guns at a time, you know, besides the reliable foundry, but you can circumvent this with co-op, letting up to 3 friends join you to build a well-rounded Swiss army. Boss health does scale off the number of players though, and if an ally dies before you can patch them up, they'll remain dead until you find a merchant that can revive them. So there is a bit of risk-reward in choosing the size of your squad. As for the members of that squad, they're a colorful bunch that add variety to your repeated playthroughs. Take for instance Ao Bai, a mountainous mastiff with the ability to dual-wield weapons for a limited time, which you can extend with certain upgrades. This guy absolutely decimates mid-game bosses if you have a good build, and he's actually my least favorite in the game. It's all uphill from there. The cel-shaded graphics also go a long way towards characterizing these eclectic critters. It actually kind of takes me back to my Overwatch days. Hey Blizzard, remember how you said Overwatch 2 would have PvE? I haven't forgotten about that, or the controversy that announcement was supposed to distract us from. Anyway, this is what I think that PvE would have looked like, and the E's in question are pretty varied. Yeah, enemy variety isn't always what I think about in arcade shooters, but each zone in this game has unique opponents themed to the environment, like the desert having bandits and the mountainous region having... UFOs? Huh, neat. Also gotta give a nod to the vaults, hidden areas in each level that teleport you to a special challenge to win an occult scroll, which are the game's passive buff items. The vaults are from a list of pre-made levels, making them the least random part of this game's design, but the fact that you're getting a random vault out of the deck each time gives it a nice balance. Gives me that feeling of, oh hey, it's this room again, let's go! With satisfying progression in and between the runs, Gunfire Reborn is chaotic, charming, and rewarding. And you can actually unlock everything just by playing the game. Seriously, doesn't this look like the kind of game that would bleed you dry with premium currency? Nope, nothing but completely transparent pricing here. God, I love indie devs. Pretty sure you expected this one. After my top 10 about the various playable skulls in Skul the Hero Slayer, it would be pretty embarrassing if it didn't make my list. So, skeletons are pretty cool, right? Scary in concept, often hilarious in execution, just fun to watch scuttle around. Well, in the land of Carleon, the forces of evil have been nearly eradicated by the heroes, upsetting the delicate balance of light and dark. So now it's up to a lowly skeletal minion to rescue demon kind. I mean, demons have rights too, you know. Cute concept aside, Skul takes the roguelike gameplay to a side-scrolling action game, which I'll admit is a personal comfort zone for me. Not that this game is easy, this might actually be one of the hardest games on the list for how you're zoomed into the action, surrounded by enemies both powerful and numerous. Though, now that we're in the top half of the list, I do feel the need to be a bit more critical. If I had one complaint, the first few areas can be a little repetitive for how often you'll be replaying them. Rooms are semi-random, but it didn't take long to see repeats. If nothing else, I would have liked to see a bit more varied level design, maybe a few more music tracks for the early zones. But Skul definitely puts its budget into its winning feature, the equipable skulls. Our protagonist can swap his head out for the heads of fallen heroes, that's one way to get your head in the game, and these skulls function as new skill sets that drastically alter the gameplay. There are a ton of them, many with multiple upgrade levels, and you can keep 2 of them at a time with you to switch between. And one of my favorite things in a roguelike is when you can get that snowball build going, where you get just the right combinations of passives and actives to become an unstoppable killing machine. Skul the Hero Slayer is perhaps the best game on this list for showing that visually. Like, look at this, what is even happening here? And there is so much flavor to every skull, from the you're already dead samurai to the multiplying monkey king, the killer vacuum ghoul, Davy Jones with his giant cannon, and bomb, which is literally just you exploding over and over again. And I'm sure this is a nightmare for the devs to balance, and to a degree they don't. If the game doesn't deem to give you a legendary skull before the second boss, it can feel impossible to really clear the run. So it's easy to feel like you're just not allowed to win yet. But with the meta collection of purple crystals and such to improve your character permanently, you're always inching closer to that run that's gonna give you a win. Sometimes you just have to embrace failure because you're gonna get them eventually. It's a lot more fun than it is fair, and the losses are so spectacular that I stopped counting them ages ago. Almost as a counterpoint to Skul's chaos, we have the deeply strategic One Step from Eden. Plenty of indie games have stepped in over the years to make spiritual successors to games that we don't get anymore. So what game does Eden seek to emulate? Mega Man Battle Network, baby! That's right, gridlock real-time movement, a shuffling deck of battle chips, called spells in this case, and a cast of rival bosses to face, all whom you can unlock as playable characters for future runs. Our main character, Saffron, is a well-rounded mage with a guardian angel retry when you die. Great for keeping in there when you're still getting used to things. Once you're comfortable, you can try out this killer violinist, this stalwart shield maiden, even the shopkeeper if you can beat her in battle. The problem is that it might be a while before you feel secure enough with the game's mechanics to experiment with other characters, because this game really doesn't explain anything to you. For example, the first time I beat a boss, I noticed that they fall prone to 1 HP, and then I realized that you could either execute them or spare them. What are the advantages of letting them go free? What are the disadvantages? Hell if I knew the first time I had to make that decision. I even tried to look for lore that might contextualize things, but besides the vague goal of going to Eden, I don't know what the hell's going on here. Turns out there's a sort of Undertale pathing going on for the end of the game, based on whether you've spared everyone, killed everyone, or somewhere in between. all with different final bosses. Okay, fair enough, but what about some of these different kinds of spells? Some spells are intuitive, especially if you've played Battle Network, breaking tiles, spawning turrets, burn, freeze, poison, shield, etc. Okay, I got that, but what the hell is flow? What is Trinity casting? And what about this rabbit I found at the campsite? Should I kill it? Will that affect my ending? As vexing as all this is though, in my opinion this is a feature and not an oversight. One Step from Eden wants you to look online for tips. Like with the Binding of Isaac, a strong community formed around this game, albeit much smaller, and these players will teach you the best strategies faster than any in-game tutorial ever could. You really just need to dig in yourself and proactively learn the game. It took me a while to discover, but you can actually set affinities for certain spells mid-run, which will increase the odds of those spells showing up in shops and treasure chests. That's pretty cool, letting you lean into certain strategies when you notice that you have some synergies going. You'll need every advantage you can get because this game is ruthless. There's no roguelite about it. None of the characters are inherently better than the other, and the only other meta progression are new passives and spells getting added to the rotation, which, sure, grow in usefulness, but also rarity. When you beat a run in this game, you know it's because you earned it. You didn't just wait for the game to get easier. You learned the boss patterns and strategically built your deck of magic around a winning gambit. Maybe you lucked out with a rare drop that completed your arsenal, but luck means nothing without the skill to capitalize on those advantages. Despite it not being turn-based, One Step from Eden is one of the most cerebral roguelikes I've ever played, asking you to master this magic into a science. Eden may seem so far away, but it's always so maddeningly close. When you're having a good run in a roguelike, wiping small enemies off the map almost automatically, it can be easy to lose track of the little things, and all of a sudden you find yourself barreling through the last few areas. It's a lot like this video actually. I got into a groove and now I'm at number 4 and I have no idea how Vampire Survivors got this high. It's a simple looking mob killer game where the attacks go off automatically and all you have to do is walk around the enemies. What's going on here? Well, I racked up hundreds of hours playing it, I must really like it. And while it looks like a mindless browser game at times, there's a lot of smart design choices under the hood. Set in Italy, Vampire Survivors centers around the Bel Pease family of monster hunters. Players choose one of the Bel Pease or their heroic volunteer allies to stand against the dark forces of Visconte Draculo. So, it's Castlevania but Italian. Sure, I can follow this. But Castlevania never looked like this. The field of battle is absolutely crawling with pixelated pests. Simon Belmont could never deal with this. But while it may seem intimidating, your attacks launch at regular intervals, and there's no real difference between different enemies besides their HP and movement patterns. All you have to do is worry about spacing while you collect those sweet, sweet experience orbs. Survive the round, and you can spend that experience on new abilities and equipment to increase your damage output, to the point where you're a walking tower defense game. It's an addictive cycle that plays on your base instinct of numbers go up and enemy quantity go down. Adding more flashy effects around you and drawing in more experience orbs to grow stronger and do it all again. And interestingly, the timer counts up, not down, with the enemy hordes getting tougher each round. You're in a constant arms race with the game trying to keep them out of your personal space. So while the mechanics are simple, simple doesn't mean easy. And while your screensaver attacks are great to watch, you'll be making strategic decisions in your build to stay ahead. This is where the genius of the game comes in. Sure, you can be a caveman and just pick the biggest damage numbers or largest sweeping attacks to buy, but sometimes it's better to delay your gratification. Make the next level a little bit harder so you can potentially get way stronger down the line. For example, there's an item called the Pentagram which, while powerful, can destroy experience orbs before you collect them. That slows down your growth, so it's quite the gamble. But it might pay off if the Crown shows up in a later shop, fusing into an incredible combo weapon that can quickly make up for the experience loss. Gamble is the perfect word actually, as these shops employ a lot of casino game design to keep you coming back for more. But, like, in a good way. A lot of the time, the math and probability are skewed in your favor. See, we as humans are pretty bad at rationalizing probability. We see a 1 in 3 chance and expect to always get the best result on every third attempt. That's not how probability actually works. It's a 1 in 3 chance every time. But that is how it actually works in Vampire Survivor. Utilizing pity values and secret modifiers, Vampire Survivor will reward you more often than it advertises to make the game feel fair, not just be fair. Like, did you know that the first 6 chests you open on a new save file always have the same 6 values, giving you the best possible chance on the 6th? Yeah, it's all to hook in new players with an early sense of momentum and start the addiction. It's not the game that's stupid, it's me. The game is playing the player. Now that might be rather unethical if this were a gacha game that charged real money for extra pulls, but this is a full game that you supposedly buy once and then you own it. It doesn't need to hook you, the devs already have your money. But they want you to have a good time. The Steam store page refers to this as a casual roguelite, one approachable to any player, and it's certainly that. But that doesn't come at the expense of thoughtful game design. It's the perfect mix of strategy and zen. And god damn it, I can't stop playing it! So what are you waiting for? This game is $5, go play it already! Vampire Survivor is a game that I can easily pick up anytime without turning my brain on. Perhaps it's better that I don't. So to beat that, my top 3 games are the highest echelon of roguelikes. Games that aren't only great for their genre, but rise above it to become some of my favorite games in recent memory. So let's talk about Risk of Rain 2. I was always fascinated with the idea of uncharted planets in games like Metroid. The original Risk of Rain was all about that feeling of unease, quickly taking in your surroundings and becoming familiar with the hostile alien life before it can become overly familiar with you. The game's sequel, fully realized in 2020, not only improves on that concept, but brings it seamlessly into 3D, tasking you as one of the unique classes of survivor to chart your course and keep up with the planet's ecosystem, which seems almost maliciously dedicated to killing you. As you mow through enemies, you'll collect experience and currency, the former of which lets you level up your max health and damage output, the latter being spent to open chests and get new equipment. Naturally, you'll want to get as much as you can gather, but like with Vampire Survivors, Risk of Rain 2 is tracking your time, and aliens will become steadily stronger as you play the game. This means it's a constant priority to grow your character, knowing every second you aren't pursuing your main objective will be held against you in the form of giant carnivorous bugs while the game literally laughs at you. Of course, you could just sprint to the end of each level, reaching a teleporter without really upgrading your character, but those teleporters take a few minutes to warm up, and as soon as you activate them, every enemy in a 10-mile radius will be coming to investigate. All the things I've complimented about the previous games on this list are here. The difficulty keeps me on my toes, the gameplay loop is addicting, and while there is a slight meta element allowing you to unlock new characters and items for the rotation, the game never loses its bite. The biggest advantage that carries between runs might be the lunar coins, which stay in your possession until spent. And if you don't feel like spending them on the lunar items, which are a seriously mixed bag anyway, you can spend them to select the next biome you visit rather than it being random. That's a neat way to do that. Rather than making you permanently stronger, you can save your coins to tailor one run to the kind of experience that you want. And best of all, the multiplayer. Risk of Rain 2 isn't the only game I played on this list with friends. Enter the Gungeon and Gunfire Reborn also have satisfying co-op. I guess shooters just lend themselves to squad gameplay. But this is easily the most fun I've had, taking a team through the risks and rewards of a roguelike. The amount of coordination and prep required for this one perfect shot is like the party hunts in Monster Hunter actually. With so many variables, inevitably the plan goes wrong and we have to alter our trajectory to compensate. When we all survive a run, it's exhilarating. And when someone gets left behind just because they keep getting screwed by enemy spawns, well, it sucks, but it's also kind of hilarious. About as hilarious as some of the shenanigans you'll run into with this game, too.
My concussive binds are not good for that kind of thing.
Yes, they are, actually.
What? Yes, they are. What?
Oh, no,
Totally
no. I mean, I haven't had the luck to do that.
It's not a luck thing. Just stand on your mind, you ding dong.
Yeah, and every time oh.
If you can find a group of friends to show you the ropes, I highly recommend it. Misery loves company, and I love this miserable planet. I hope it never stops raining.
So, Oscar, did you play Dead Cells yet, you schmuck?
Yes, I did finally play Dead Cells, and yes, it's freaking incredible! Leave me alone, North. Skul the Hero Slayer gave us side-scrolling, but Dead Cells gives me one of my favorite combo genres I've ever experienced, a roguelike Metroidvania. You play as the prisoner, and it's your job to navigate a series of worlds with maybe the third biggest repertoire of weapons on this list. The amount of content in this game is huge, and that's partly because of the metric ton of DLC available for this game. Kinda daunting when you have to buy more stuff for the full package, so I wouldn't blame you if you noped out of the whole endeavor. However, the DLC packs are pretty cheap and they go on sale very often, as does the base game. Considering the number of hours I poured into this game, it's still got one of the better time-to-money ratios of anything I've played in recent years. The minute-to-minute gameplay is incredibly tight. Bosses get really hard later on, but there's room to learn their patterns and strive for perfect runs. Sure, you're getting steadily more powerful with each run, collecting items that are helpfully color-coded for different build strategies, as helpful as color coding can be for someone like me, but rarely will you snowball so hard that you can just turn your brain off. You'll need to keep in step with these bosses to save your precious health. And that's actually one of the main forms of meta progression in this game. The cell system is an incredibly satisfying way to permanently unlock things, the most useful being the backpack for inventory management and allowing you to carry more flasks. And if you're ever in a pinch, you might be able to heal yourself with some classic wall chicken. Keeping the Castlevania tradition alive, I see, even before that huge crossover content pack. Once again, another game gives more love to Castlevania than Konami does. But it's not even just Castlevania. Motion Twin's done partnerships with a whole bunch of indie games to put special weapons in the dungeons. References to Katana Zero, Hotline Miami, Shovel Knight. This is a real champion of indie games. Enter the Gungeon loves its references too, cataloging all the items you've seen in the Aminomicon. But in Dead Cells, you can see every item hanging from the ceiling at the start of each run, giving you an idea of how much you've played and how much there's still left to discover. Now that's really cool. And there's always more to discover in this game. I'm still working on it. My only problem with the game is that it locks the true ending maybe a bit too deep in the post-game. Granted, this is a roguelike. Of course you want to do more after your first successful run. That's why most of these have difficulty mods that you can play after your first win. Dead Cells uses its cell system with boss cells that put crazy restrictions on the player. It's just maybe a bit too brutal. Extra damage, less healing, you're pretty much asking me to be perfect Cell here. And yes, I fully acknowledge I'm complaining about the true ending being a bit too difficult to achieve. Makes me sound like a bit of a noob, but seriously, you try it. Just because it's a roguelite doesn't mean it's actually lighter than any roguelike. This is feeling pretty heavy. But, you know, I love the struggle. Says a lot about the game when I want the true ending enough to put up with all this BS. So while I fear that this will embolden my friend for recommending the game to me in the first place, Dead Cells clearly deserves every bit of praise it gets.
Few tales are told of Hades, whose very name inspires fear and penitence, reminding us of the inevitable fate which we all share. I, however, mean to tell you such a tale. Listen carefully.
Are you even surprised? Was there ever any doubt? Did you think for a moment that Hades wouldn't be number one? Well, maybe, only because Hades 2 is getting so much attention right now. In fact, it's the reason I took a break from the true ending of Dead Cells. But Hades 2 is still in early access, so while we still have the chance, let's take this moment to acknowledge why the first Hades is a God-blessed masterpiece. Supergiant Games, it's been so great to watch you grow from an unassuming indie dev to a dream team that can seemingly do no wrong. From Bastion to Transistor to Pyre, in retrospect, each project seems like a stepping stone that would eventually lead to Hades. Already you had a dedication to killer music and on-point voice performances, excellent isometric action, and a fine eye for detail. Like its predecessors, Hades not only has decade-tempered mechanics, but a diegetic reasoning for those mechanics that fits into the world for a ludonarrative synergy other games can only dream of. Using the mythology of ancient Greece and its unspoken exposition, we play as Zagreus, son of the titular god of the dead who has decided that he's sick of living under his father's chthonic thumb. You take one of the 6 infernal weapons and make your way up the levels of hell, through ghoulish graveyards and lava lagoons, until inevitably you die. Fortunately, dying just means that you go back to the bottom level of the underworld. It's not permanent, but it does mean that you have to drag your burning hot feet past Hades' desk, where he'll condescend to you that escape is impossible, and it's not even worth it for him to try to stop you. Well, we'll see about that, Dad. I'm gonna go live with Mom, and she'll let me play Xbox whenever I want. Like with most roguelikes, the game has 2 modes you'll switch between, the runs and the downtime in between. And those runs are great. You get the boons from the gods of Olympus, who love the idea of Hades' kid coming to hang out with Uncle Zeus, fight awesome monsters like the Hydra and the Minotaur, have chance encounters with friendly NPCs who will help you on your way, and die again because it's you versus everyone who's ever died. What did you expect? If it was just based on this gameplay, this would already be a contender. Each of the weapons has an amazing feel to them, from the noob-friendly Stygian sword to the Jarvan the Fourth spear to the ancient Greek machine gun. And it's fun to focus a build towards boons from certain gods, each of which has a unique flavor to their abilities, like Dionysus' poison stacks to Athena's deflection barriers. And sometimes you get a choice between two gods, and whichever one you don't pick will get pissed off and try to kill you for a bit, which is pretty funny actually. Really captures how petty these gods would have been in those old stories. But Hades does more than any other roguelike I've played at that second phase of the game, the place you run back to between runs. The House of Hades has its own slew of characters who may or may be around on any given day, and talking to them enough over time furthers different stories with each of them. There's so much freaking dialogue in this game, literally more writing than the Iliad or the Odyssey combined. I don't think I've ever seen a repeat line on one save file, and all of it is voiced.
Sometimes, boyo, you make me feel alive again, you know that? Being honest with you here, I'm grateful, really. If not for you, my friend, I'd have no one to viciously attack with no fear of reprisal whatsoever.
This is also where you can spend some of the many meta currencies you collect through your runs. Shadows can be put in the mirror to permanently upgrade Zagreus, borderline essential for beating the game. You can pay contractors and crystals to decorate the house, and by collecting nectar and ambrosia, you can give gifts to NPCs, both at home and in the actual runs, allowing you to collect and level up different trinkets that each give a unique passive ability. There's even a few dating quests in this game. You can date Megara and Thanatos at the same time. But there will never be enough ambrosia to quench this game's thirst. Everyone is fucking gorgeous. It's that combination of addicting gameplay, gripping story, and a palpable sense of progress that makes this game so unbelievably great. You'll eventually hit a cap with how much you can upgrade Zagreus, so it's not like you can power level your way through the game, but by that point, you'll have learned what to look out for to improve your game, even what build strategies you like to watch for. And when you finally clash with the titular Hades himself and make your way to the surface, the game gets better. Like, yeah, all these games have reasons to keep playing past the first run, but it usually feels like the story is over and you're just going back for fun. Maybe with a new character or for higher difficulties. But at this point in Hades, there's still more story to tell. In fact, it's built into the story, in a quite emotionally engaging way, I might add. And that's when you unlock the heat system, and in my opinion, it's the best difficulty modding system of any roguelike. Now you can try your luck against higher quantities of enemies, higher health bars, environmental hazards, and the coolest one, new versions of each boss. Extreme Measures Hades goes hard! But there is one more reason why Hades is number one, something that other roguelikes don't really touch on, and that's the theme. The story of a roguelike actually being canonically, narratively, a roguelike. I think it could be best described by Sisyphus, a character who is actually in this game. He's the guy who spends every day pushing a boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down. To quote Albert Camus, one must imagine Sisyphus happy, and indeed he is, because even though he may never get the boulder to the top, he enjoys the act of pushing the boulder itself. Just like for us, we may defeat the NecroDancer, we may slay the Spire, we may survive the vampire, escape the planet, surpass Hades even on maximum heat. But the point isn't to achieve the final victory. It's to perfect the craft and enjoy the game, master the mechanics, and truly know the digital world that we're spending time in. Cutting down Theseus feels great, but so does reuniting Orpheus and Eurydice, or helping Dusa gain her confidence. Ironically, the closer you get to escaping the underworld, the nicer a place it becomes just from the effort that you put in. Zagreus never really had to leave. Things just had to change, including Zagreus himself. This is a game where you want to try and fail and try and fail and try and win and try again. And I have every expectation that Hades 2 will live up to its Olympian standard of quality. But for now, Hades is the best roguelike game of all time, in my humble, mortal opinion. And if not, strike me down. Or comment your favorite in the comments, either one works. So until next time, I'm the Green Scorpion, and I'll see you all in the... Oh, come on!